Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Hummy, and peace out to the rest of you. It is the blackest hearted, blackest minded, blackest man on social media, signing black and shining again, asking you to hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. Yesterday, my message was one message, but two different lengths and two different levels of detail, depending on the time you have. I just happen to have time to record one message twice, so to speak. So I did. Shout out to my wife for helping me to get on to a better and more productive schedule and maximize his time. Shout out to Dwight Hayes for inspiring this message I'm recording for you right now today to help you out. Let me go ahead and point this out to you right quick, if I may. We're going to have to recalibrate our internal relationship so as to possibly know how to relate to other people that are not us. In order to do that, we're going to have to be more balanced in how we relate to each other. Now, we may not have the customs of other nations. We don't have to. And we don't have to have customs that are different from theirs either. But when I say customs, I'm talking about two types. Number one, we don't necessarily have to have the traditions that other nations have, and we don't have to shun everything that just because it's also done among other people. But we do also have to understand the other meaning of the word customs, the control of what comes into and out of the nation. We may not have that force of customs either as an independent nation until you go into independent African or Caribbean nations. But even still, we do have to start thinking as independently as other nations do. If you are going to subdue your own independent thought with another way of thinking, it should be with something based on a revelation. And if you're going to pick a revelation, you're going to have to pick one that cannot be proven to be untrue. That's part of why it is, and I told you that the solution is what I told you it is. You can find discrepancies in the Bible, Old and New Testament. The Quran does not have contradictions, despite what some churches have tried to claim. As a matter of fact, even the idea that there are contradictions in it is a very new idea. This was not known previously. That idea didn't start till about the 1900s, I think. But that's another topic for another day. I also want to point out to you that at the end of the day, when it comes down to our alliances with others, Dr. John Henry Clark was almost 100% correct. And that we don't necessarily have allies. Our friends are only those we can see in the mirror. Now, not everybody's necessarily an enemy either. There are people who don't have a particular relationship with us one way or another, so they're kind of neutral. These people do exist, even collectively speaking. It's just that the only place I found them is Southeast Asia. Now, they got their own brainwashing, but not necessarily a hostility towards us. In other cases, maybe even a preference towards us, and it extends beyond sex. So, that's the end of it. But many people around the world don't prefer us, and they don't even see us as equal. And they may want us to add to their numbers when they're trying to protest because white folks don't like them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that when they get a token, a symbol, not the real deal, but a token or a symbol of acceptance from white folks, that they ain't gonna turn their backs on us. They have done this in exchange for tokens and symbols. They are not on our side. They are not our friends. Most of them are not. Every Latino is not an enemy. I mean, many Colombians just don't look at us as enemies. Actually, many Colombians will tell you there is no Colombia without Africa. But before Colombia, there was Africa. This is the same common among Colombians of different races, different phenotypes. The Colombian is not always like the other Latin Americans. The Mexican in general, yes, they have to learn not to look down on us, because by default they will. Central Americans, back and forth. Panamanians, Costa Ricans, they've been more accepting, from my understanding. It's what others have told me that have been there. I haven't been to Central America yet. But, you know, in other parts, yes, they want to be as white as possible. And I'm not for that. I don't respect that opinion. I do not respect the opinion that white is more beautiful than black. I don't even fully respect the opinion that light skin is more beautiful than darker skin in other non-black peoples. I barely respect it among black folks. But I also understand that when men say this, that oftentimes it depends on who likes them. One reason that a lot of dark-skinned men will openly prefer lighter-skinned women is also because lighter-skinned women will pursue them. Will treat them differently. Will give them more of a chance. That's one of the reasons. There may be some self-hate in an individual, and I don't know about it, or I do, but on a collective basis, when darker-skinned black men prefer lighter-skinned women, it is oftentimes because lighter-skinned women will openly admit when they prefer darker-skinned men anyway. The ones of them who don't will still act like they do in many cases. So all we know is lighter-skinned women will give a lighter-skinned guy a chance more easily. Lighter-skinned women will give a darker-skinned man a chance more easily. That's what we know. Lighter and darker-skinned women oftentimes are not comfortable with light-skinned men, or they're not comfortable admitting if they even have the preference. They're not even comfortable admitting if they don't have a preference. The preference can only be for darker-skinned men. Even Rashida Strober explained this very well. Whether it's true or not, she's going to say, well, her boyfriend came to her. She does not approach men. Even she said that. Yes, she got a light-skinned boyfriend, but that's because he approached her. She does not approach men. You can't be a real feminist if you can't approach a man. I mean, a feminist that can approach a man is always going to be more authentic of a feminist than a woman that cannot approach a man. If a woman cannot approach a man, she cannot be a feminist. If she refuses to approach a man, she cannot be a real, true feminist. This is one point with which I disagree. And yes, part of it is based on ego, but the major part of it, the reason I'm willing to speak out on it, is because it's based on logic. But we got to assess our own internal relationship, and we have to address colorism and discuss it, but be willing to actually listen as well as talk. We have to address the class divide and be willing to listen as well as talk. And we have to be willing to give a subject a lot of deep thought before we engage in discussions and try to speak on them, and do some research too. If you're coming with an opinion and anecdotal observations, I'm willing to listen as long as you fuck the shuck up when someone else comes with stats. We have to do this, because this is going to determine how it is that we're going to relate to other people. If we're going to allow a Southern Indian into the cookout, so to speak, you could be right in doing so, but that has to be based on that Southern Indian being considered a traitor to other Indians by the Indian community, because he opposes the false religion of white supremacy and the false god of whiteness. If he is a Hindu, he can't do that, because white supremacy is ingrained in Hinduism. Understand this. There is a trifecta that is against you, black man. Islamophobia, Hinduism, and white supremacy. These things are related to each other. Now, white supremacists may have no respect for a Hindu, but it's not because the gods are too dark, it's because the worshipers are too dark. That same white supremacist is usually Islamophobic as well. Again, not because God has any color to us that we would know about. We don't know until we see him, and we ain't gonna see him until the very end. And that's after Judgment Day, and only a few are gonna be allowed even to see him, as far as we're concerned. So the color of God and I seek refuge from speculating about that, is not the reason that the white supremacist is also an Islamophobe. It is the color of the worshipers. This is a trifecta that is against you, black folks. It is against the Muslims, whatever color they are, and it is against you, whatever religion you are. So the ultimate opposition to that is the Muslim that is also black. And even then, the Muslim that is unapologetically black is the ultimate opposition, the elite opposition to them. So that being said, I will be one of the first to tell you, in all honesty, that the Muslim is not the one that is going around and burning Hindu neighborhoods and committing atrocities against Hindus. The black person is not the one going around committing atrocities against lighter-skinned people around the world, I mean. In black America, that is the one place I know where you will find an exception, where somebody will beat the crap out of someone who's light-skinned because they're light-skinned. They just won't say that's why they're doing it, but that's why they'll do it. America is the one place where they might do this. Maybe the UK as well. Possibly. That will happen. They will do it because you pale, and the person doing it may or may not be very dark themselves. The person that I had to fight 3 times within a 5-year period in my neighborhood assumed that I was weaker. He wasn't dark himself. Matter of fact, his mother taught him colorism. But when it came to me, he assumed because I was not only smaller, but also lighter and my hair was straighter, he was just going to have an easy fight on his hands. And at first he did. And every time we fought, it got harder. I wasn't necessarily assumed to be an easy target strictly by jet black people. Matter of fact, I never had a fight with anybody that was jet black. They weren't the problem either. And it's not because they didn't exist, it's because they didn't start stuff. If they didn't like me, they just didn't talk much. If they didn't trust me or thought I wasn't trustworthy, they just were silent. Maybe if we knew each other, they might greet me, shake my hand, and keep going. How you doing? Good to see you again. But they never got hostile right off the bat. At least not the males. No, bro. Any other shade could or could not. But we got to work on the internal relationship so that we understand how we relate to others. And the thing we have to do is we have to start scrutinizing as well the outward shows of loyalty towards us. You don't assume the person's lying. They may not be. We're not here to push away allies that really mean to be allies. But you do have to watch. You do have to keep an eye out. You got to let them know that you're keeping an eye, that you're watching them, and that you're going to treat them accordingly. And that you're not going to assume the best or the worst about them. That's what you got to do. Secondly, you have to understand that when you find, we all know that cool ass white dude, down ass white dude, he raps a little bit, dance, he'll hoop, shoot some ball with you, got some sound in his car. You have to understand that when you see that person, that white dude, you need to realize that that's the one who, if you're going to outright distrust someone who seems to be showing loyalty, that's the one that you would outright distrust until proven otherwise, and I'm going to tell you why. If there's a Southern Indian that identifies with black folks, hangs out with them, chances are he doesn't hate the white person for being white. He may not trust them, but he doesn't hate them for being white. If there's a cool ass white dude seems to want to be black, you know, the so-called wigger from the 90s, still watch how he relates to other non-whites, especially when they have their own countries. Why? If he says, yeah, man, black folk cool, it's Muslims I can't stand, that's when you look at him side-eye like, the fuck is your problem with them? Because see, the reason is because the religion is not is not meant to domesticate you for white supremacy. The Muslims have been domesticated by white supremacy, or for the sake of it, but the religion is not such. And he doesn't understand how domesticated many non-black Muslims are. And that's what bothers him about it. See, in the religion, there is no white privilege. He doesn't understand how brainwashed the Muslims may be, but he knows that in this religion there is no white privilege. He thinks there's Arab privilege, and that bothers him. He's not Lord and Master anymore. He's not doing them any favors when he joins them, as far as he understands. Now, if he were to actually become a Muslim and he was sincere, he would be disgusted at how much they act like he's doing them a favor, but he doesn't know that because he's not sincere. He's not interested in it anyway. So you got to watch him and realize this nigga's really not an ally. Because that which actually could be a solution for you is a problem for him. If your solution is somebody else's problem, then either they have to admit that they are part of the problem or they can't be your ally. Even if they loved you personally, they couldn't do it. I mean, it's just like the crack addict that's a family member. And that nigga's sick, man. The dude, not even sick. The dude is a crack addict. He your cousin. He may love you personally. You may love him personally. But that crack keeps calling and calling. He's just got to go to it like Pookie. If he can't admit that your solution is his problem, then he can't fix himself. Therefore, he can't be your ally. You can't rely on him. And he can't expect you to cater to his crack addiction, can he? Because you ain't trying to kill your cousin. You ain't trying to help him commit suicide. So you see? Now, what about that? What about that Arab? That's simple. They're too brainwashed even though they don't hate you. You don't have to treat them like they're a danger per se. You just got to understand that if they're not going to unbrainwash themselves, then they could be brainwashed later on, after about maybe 2 more generations. I mean, as it is, a lot of them do think that many black Americans are criminals and that we're the ones that are dangerous. So they kind of sympathize with white Americans more if the white American has a problem with us. I would say to them, if you think that white people are our equals in the West, you don't understand Islam. You're an Arab, but you're not really a Muslim, or you're an ignorant-ass Muslim. And either one is just as bad as the other as far as we're concerned. You have to be for the oppressed against the oppressor in Islam. You can't be neutral unless you really don't know the situation and you're aware that you don't know. Once you know the situation, you're not allowed to be neutral anymore. If you can't do anything to change it, you still have to understand who's right and who's wrong based on the knowledge of the situation. They don't have that. They're not thinking about that. What they're thinking about is what they see on TV. They don't like it when they're depicted as terrorists, but good God Almighty, they don't have a damn thing to say when you're depicted as a criminal waiting at every ATM at night trying to rob somebody. They're not challenging that narrative. Not at all. When they see that the Native American is depicted as a savage, they're not challenging that narrative either. I've had to tell him before, no, nigga, the white cowboys were a goddamn problem. In those movies, the Indians weren't the savages. It was the white cowboys. The Indians were there first. They didn't kill everybody just for not being themselves. That's not the way that worked. They actually, if you really want to know the truth, they were the victims. So when you see a white boy that does actually identify himself even as a Muslim, but he doesn't apologize for the way that white folks took the Americas, then you say to him, then you don't have a goddamn thing to say, you fake Muslim, about Arabs or Africans taking over Europe. If anything, we're not doing it fast and we're not doing it quickly and violently enough, if what you're saying is true. So F your white America, F your white Canada, and even F your white Europe. You belong nowhere. That's what you say to him. That's if he identifies himself as Muslim and says this. That's if he identifies himself even as a sheikh and he studied in Medina or Mecca or in Riyadh. wherever he studied, when he takes on that line. That's how you relate to other people. If the conqueror is always right, dummy, then it's time for us to start conquering you. Because obviously you're white before you're Muslim. And that's not Islam. That's how you got to relate to other people. Because at the end of the day, you got to understand this, black folks. The world's religion is white supremacy, and the world's God is whiteness, even in the minds and the hearts of many who think they're Muslim and even mean to be Muslim. So you got to realize that you're actually up against not just an ideology, you're up against an international religion and its false God. That's what you're up against. Most of us in Black America, fortunately, don't fully see it that way. We don't fully see whites as being supreme. We see them as being advantaged and privileged, and that's a good thing. But what we have to understand as well is that Africa is not the enemy either. ADOS is a description, not a division. And we don't need that. Because then everybody that says ADOS and everybody that talks about being ADOS then is going to wind up in an argument. Do we relate to the Caribbeans because they also have the experiences of slavery, or do we not relate to them? Did you not know that even in Africa there were the experiences of slavery? What the hell do you think that the Belgians did in the Congo? You think they only colonized them? No, they enslaved them on their own land. They cut off their hands for not getting enough rubber from the trees. They had soldiers, and the soldiers had to commit rapes, or the soldiers would lose their jobs and be executed. Do you not understand the level of oppression that was going on there? On their own land. But you want to sit up here and try to be divisive, some of you. And you're doing it because of what a carpet muncher said. So you want to be more divisive against other black folks simply because of where they were born and where their parents were born and the passport of their parents and the languages that their parents were raised up speaking by their grandparents. Before, you want to turn around and end this handshake with the LGBTQ community that's not even being oppressed, but rather just mad because people don't like them because they're disgusted about what these folks do in private, even though they're not facing job discrimination. Actually, the only ones that face job discrimination are the white gays. Black gay males don't face it. Black gay women probably don't. But black gay males do not face job discrimination, according to a study that was done, and I saw it published in 2014 around about this month. Yeah, y'all didn't know about that, did you? So you want to sit up here and maintain this handshake with that alphabet community, but you don't want to extend the hand of friendship anymore to another black person because he got an accent and he probably ain't from Chicago. Stupid nigga. And here's the thing about it. If you really want to know the truth, again, the greatest division, the greatest threat to black unity, which is not even based on race, but rather based on a universal black need for self-defense, really. It's not an ideal, but a practical need we have in order to defend ourselves from white supremacy and everybody else's unanimity on keeping us at the bottom. But the biggest threat to this black cooperation, this necessary functional unity, is not even black men, actually. When you think about it, it's not even all black women. It is specifically the sapphire and sometimes the boom shika. Sophistiratchet sapphire. Neck rolling, attitude having ass bitch, but she got a little degree and a little bit of money. She ain't completely broken living on Section 8, living in Section 8. And then there's Boom Shika. I can't stand them Africans. She can't even pronounce it correctly. Africans, like there's no R. Ooh, them Africans make me sick and they stank. And what the hell happens? Sophistiratchet sapphire, wanting to either keep it real because she came from the hood and got out, or because she wasn't raised in the hood and she wants to win their loyalty, she gonna sit up here and repeat the same thing just in a slightly more educated manner. Well, they don't like black Americans and they look down on us because we were enslaved. No, Southern Nigerians look down on everybody. They don't like anybody. They don't even like each other. They're the problem to a certain extent, even according to other Nigerians that aren't from the South, let alone other nationalities. Let alone them. The average Liberian ain't got nothing against you African Americans unless they had a bad experience with you, and usually it took more than one. The average Ethiopian does not hate you African Americans. Now, they see you as unfortunate victims of kidnapping and slavery. They see other Africans as unfortunate victims of colonization, but they oppose these things. If you don't mistreat them, they're not a part of the problem. No, they don't hate you. That's not true about Ethiopians hating other black people. That is not true. They are a country of more than 58 million. Back in 1997, they were 58 million. I don't know what their population is now. You think all of them are going to have the same attitude? No, but they actually have a history of training resistance troops against colonization because they were independent. Yeah, did you know that Zimbabwe, I think it was Zimbabwe. Some of the South African resistance fighters against apartheid took refuge in not only Tanzania, but also in Ethiopia. Just to be fair, just to give them some credit. But then you got Sophista Ratchet, Sapphire, and Boom Shika want to talk bad about Africans. And we actually let them talk us into that because we want to fuck her. And that's been, our mistake has been following them in that regard. But we were not that major threat to the unity of black folks that is necessary. Not because we're all going to agree on each other. I'm not going to agree with many of you on religion. But because we do need a common defense since the world is unanimous, almost unanimous, I should say, about 90% unanimous in keeping us at the bottom. And us belonging at the bottom. That's the truth of the matter. The major threat is actually not even the southern Nigerian from the Lagos metro area, because usually they're just talking junk. They do it with anybody. Usually they don't even really hate you when they talking this stuff. They may not like you, yeah, they pompous, but they don't necessarily walk around with hatred either. They're not even the major threat. It is the Boom Shika and the Sophista Ratchet Sapphire. It is her. That's why Yvette Carnell, with her carpet munching behind, got up and talked this stuff, and you dumb niggas listened. She wasn't talking about the Ghanaian, the Gambian, the Senegalese. They don't hate you. The Liberian, the Sierra Leonean, they don't hate you. No. She simply was talking about everybody that's not black American for one reason. In many other black nations, their women don't support this kind of stuff that she's doing. That's why. So she wanted to separate us from them because most of us are going to be more accepting of what she's doing, whereas most of them are not necessarily going to be accepting of that. Assalamu alaikum. Most of them are going to look at the stuff that she's doing and they're going to say, oh, hell no. That's in the islands and in the continent. That's where the problem comes in. She knows she cannot find the same level of acceptance in those nationalities that she could find. And the thing is that she knew, she saw a change, because I saw the same change. In about the early 2000s, black folks from different nationalities began to party more together. Now, I'm not saying that the party scene was where it's at because I am a Muslim, but I know they were partying more together because right before I became a Muslim, I saw it. But what that does mean is that the young folks who party together today may be discussing business moves together tomorrow when they get older and more mature. So I'm going to be honest with you, the trend I saw was that different black nationalities were getting closer to each other. And this began to bother some of us, mostly those of us that were white supremacist, white conservative. Oh yeah, how can a black person be white conservative? It's simple. You're black, but you're conservative in a way that white folks like. If that's what you are, you're part of the issue. I know that sounds very cut and dry, right? But look, if you're going to be conservative, you got to be conservative for your benefit. Not maybe for your and somebody else's benefit, maybe for everybody's benefit. You cannot be a conservative strictly for the benefit and to the taste of the one that does not think of you as an equal and is your historical enemy. And I'm going to do maybe more on a balanced black conservatism later on. Maybe I'll record that later. But right now, you need to understand that the major threat has not necessarily been, it ain't been your average June bug. It ain't been your average shine. It's that major threat, really. Because if you think about it, we don't walk around here hating people because they come from somewhere else. Hell, most of us are sick of fighting with each other, sick of our friends fighting with each other because of the neighborhoods they come from. We get sick of that. We get fatigued from that. So we get tired of that. We understand how stupid that sounds. What we're dealing with is Boom Chic and Sophista Ratchet want us to fight somebody else because of where they from. Because she's a hybristophiliac. She can't get wet till she sees you commit some violence, and even then, you better not lose. But you're still a punk if you always pick and fights you can win. That's really what, and I hate to sit up here and always sound like I'm blaming a black woman, but I'm not even blaming a black woman, because you got pro-black women that are authentically pro-black. Some of these women, they actually do even spend their lives with men from other countries, and they stay with them. Black men from other countries, and stay with them. These women, there are such women, they do exist. They're actually more likely to find a black man from another country because they're real women. But I am going to blame the ignorant, the idnicet, the stereotype, the Sophista Ratchet Sapphire and Boom Chica. I'm going to blame them for this stuff. I'm going to say to them, I'm going to tell you about them, actually. Ain't nothing to say to them no more. I'm telling you about them. Don't listen to them. Yvette Carnell is one of them. If she's carpet munching in private, none of us knew anything about it, then we wouldn't know anything about it. What did she do? Nah, Yvette Carnell, she had to go and, she got to promote this stuff. And then try to turn us against those of other nationalities who don't promote it because they see it as unnatural. Well, newsflash, most of the world saw this sort of thing as unnatural. I've only heard of one country, actually, from ancient history that didn't see this as completely unnatural, and that was Japan. They also thought that it was natural for some guys to be digging out little boys. I'm sorry, ancient Japan, certain city-states of ancient Greece, Rome, and one society in Papua New Guinea. And that's it. That's all I know of. The rest of the world was like, what the hell is that? So they want you to sit up here and turn against your own relatives for the sake of sexual practices that most of us find naturally unappealing, even though we don't oppress the people that engage in them. That's really what you've been dealing with. You've been hoodwinked. You've been tricked. You've been deceived. You've been had. You've been bamboozled. You didn't land on ADOS. ADOS landed on you. Yeah, I had to steal that from somebody right quick, but you get the idea. Now, what we're going to do about this, very simply put, we're going to start looking at ourselves as being better than everybody that is a racist, a white supremacist. Hands down. If people have this mindset, consciously or subconsciously, they are not our moral equals. That's the first thing we need to understand. So that when we come across people that have that mindset, we don't look up to them like there's something special. That's the first thing we need to do. Secondly, we need to start understanding that if you come up with a term to describe something, that we're not just going to automatically turn it into another tool of division or let somebody else do it for that matter. Okay, we're ADOS, American descendants, or actually African-American descendants of slaves. Okay, that's what we are. That's a descriptive term. You can use that for politics and for an accurate discussion of history. This does not mean that somebody else gets to come along like some white dude and say, wait a minute, I don't owe him any money because, no. How about Cracker, you shut up? Because you owe the whole entire world at this point. Who you don't owe, nah, bruh. That ain't the question. Actually, that is a question. And we're going to be waiting a long time for that answer. Who you don't owe. You don't owe the Martians or the man on the moon because those are the ones that didn't suffer from your oppression. Or your ancestors' oppression, my bad. From which you have inherited your wealth and advantage. That's the first thing. We work on this internal relationship. Then after that, we turn around and we start working on the external relationships based on this. Based on the understanding that whoever has white supremacy in their mind, subconsciously or consciously, is not our equal. If it's subconscious, you make them conscious of it so they can correct it. If they won't, they're not your moral equal. If they're conscious of it, they're already not your moral equal. That's how we have to start seeing it. That the world is subscribing to a false religion. And if they're not willing to fix that and topple that false god, they are not your equal. And we even start relating to each other based on that. And we do not follow the women who want to undo positive trends in the community, like dividing us because more of us were beginning to reach out more to other black folks from other nationalities and vice versa. But we were also coming to understand that this booty banditry and these same-sex relationships that were propagating in our communities were not normal for us. Really for people in general, but certainly not to us. That obviously we learned this from somebody else who hates us. So what are we doing leaving this stuff? What are we doing acting like it's something natural? Even to the point that certain directors now want to turn around and inject homosexuality where it never existed into history. Self-made, anyone? Color Purple? Yeah. So that's my rant about how we're going to relate internally and externally. I appreciate that. If you are from the motherland, even if you are a southern Nigerian from the Lagos metro area and you're used to talking crap about other people, which I don't condone, because that has been the tool that everybody else has been able to use to divide our people. But if you are, regardless of the part of the continent you from, minus the North, of course, not because I hate the North, but because, look, y'all got to work your stuff out internally first. First, you got to know that you're black and be okay with it. But if you're from the rest of it, I'm glad to know more about your nation and what y'all actually face. We can talk and compare notes. What did the colonizer do to you? And be honest, what did you all do to each other, good and bad? We need to know more of these things. We do need to learn more about each other so that we can better cooperate to defend each other's backs, because this is a necessity. Because understand this, when somebody goes against one of us, and they're from the outside, they're not usually doing it because you're Nigerian or because you're Christian or because you're a Muslim. They're not usually doing it for that reason. They're usually doing it because you are black. That's why. That's what the reason is. And oftentimes the Christian will go against the black Christian. The Muslim that's not black will go against the black person who's Muslim. This is usually what happens. So we're forced to have a common defense. We're not going to always agree. I get that. But what we do have to do is understand that our safety is in jeopardy because the world is trained to hate us. And not because of anything we did wrong, but simply because we resemble Adam and Eve. I hope that this benefits. And that one day it's not true anymore. And that until then, in the meantime, that it helps. The blackest of the black sign of blackout, assalamu alaikum, and black male power, black heterosexual male power, specifically because Boom Shika, Sapphire, and White Zaddy don't like it.